I just finished watching the Power On documentary. It is a six-part documentary that is for free on YouTube. And it does a really good job of encapsulating the history of Xbox from its original inception all the way through pretty modern stuff, up through the Series X for sure. It is really interesting because, unlike a lot of other documentaries that I have watched in the past, particularly ones that highlight a very specific topic, they tend to sugarcoat the story a little bit, and you can get a sense of an agenda kind of built into the documentary. I didn't feel that way with this one, and I think that's really to Xbox's credit. From my understanding, this is definitely recorded and edited from somebody that is not day to day with Xbox. And I'm sure that Microsoft probably had the final say on everything, of course, right? However, it was really interesting to see a raw version of what had happened. And I think this does a phenomenal job of an end cap for the 20 years of Xbox celebration that has been going on for quite some time, launching earlier in the year, obviously with tons of merchandise, increased emphasis on some virtual fan fest activities. Definitely with the the launch of Halo and that kind of surprise launch, the limited edition console, tons of limited edition gear, controllers, that sort of thing. And then it kind of wraps up with a nice documentary of something to watch. It breaks up into six different episodes that run anywhere from like 40 to 50 or so minutes. It was really cool to see. I have YouTube Premium. I don't know if it had ads or not. The one nice thing about YouTube Premium is you don't have to worry about ads. So I don't know if it constantly broke it up, but I thought each topic was very well discussed. It even delves into stuff of like the red ring of death, which I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but there's a whole episode dedicated to that, and I thought that was really interesting. So what I thought would be interesting was to kind of jump through some of the episodes. Obviously, not watch them with you here. I encourage you to do so, but just to give you guys some of my thoughts because I was around during all of this. Obviously, I'm an older guy. I'll be 40 next year. I remember all these moments very well. And while I didn't jump on the Xbox train until a little bit later on, really at the launch of the Xbox 360, it was interesting from the perspective of a true Sony pony and PC gamer to kind of see the Xbox come up. The first episode really delves into the history of what they're calling the Renegades. This is the team that decided they wanted to actually make a console to compete with Sony. And what was the real big takeaway here, I thought, was Sony had said something to the effect of, we want a PlayStation in every living room. And Microsoft, a predominantly software based company at that time, took that as a attack on their hold with Windows and how the PC gaming world had exploded, and not even gaming, just PC users in general. And it was really based on that single sentence that drove this whole machine that Microsoft was afraid they may potentially lose out on sales of Windows. And they wanted to get a Windows based box into your living room, not just into your home office. That was a very fascinating revelation. And I wonder if PlayStation's message had been marketed differently, if Xbox would have even considered entering the market at all. I wonder if that would have even been a consideration, or they would have said, we're going to stick with PC gaming. That's our tried and true bread and butter. But that was very interesting as well. The second and third chapter really it's called the Valentine's Day Massacre, which was the major pitch to actually get this thing going. And then chapter three, and it didn't turn on, talks a lot about the early generation of Xbox and a lot of the development trials and tribulations that went into it. I didn't see anything too revelatory here. It sounds like they were grossly unprepared and not really ready for what they did, but it took the determination and heart of a lot of key people to push through a lot of the hardware to finally culminate and get everything together. I think the big takeaway here was that it was always backed with a big bank account in Microsoft. and the fact that anytime they hit a roadblock, they threw money at the problem and fixed it. And they initially had said, I believe in chapter one, that it was going to essentially be $1 billion to kind of sink and get this whole situation going. I don't ultimately know what it ended up costing them. I feel like it was a lot more. It feels like at that point they kind of stuck their name out there and they were stuck, building into this. And obviously they've reaped the rewards over the years. They're doing great as a company, but it's very clear to me that while there were a passionate group of people who really heavily invested and believed in this, a great personal sacrifice. A lot of them talk about relationships failing and staying in the office and not going home and having to get their dog away. Like some pretty heartbreaking stuff, honestly. Microsoft constantly backed them in anything they needed. So big payrolls there for sure. I think where most people will find the documentary most interesting, I know I did, is kind of when Xbox reached a much better stage of maturity in chapters 4 and 5 of this documentary called Cool, Now What, and The Red Ring of Death. Talks kind of about how really chapter 4 was almost completely dedicated to Halo. Talks a lot about Bungie and about the trials and tribulations that they went through in order to develop a first person shooter on a console, and how insane the Halo craze is, and how much everybody loves Halo, and how it was really a tent pole and kind of a great beacon for the Xbox, and it was the reason to own the console. We see this quite a bit in modern console launches. Maybe not so much now that gaming is much more widely accepted, but I remember being a kid and hearing my parents talk about the new Mario, and that was the reason to buy said console, was for the new game. You didn't buy Sega because you believed in their third party support. You bought Sega because you wanted to play Sonic. Well, in a very similar way back then, you bought an Xbox because you wanted to play Halo. PlayStation's still out there rocking and kicking and doing great things, but nobody had an answer for what Halo was, and Microsoft doubled, quadrupled, quintupled down on that thought process. And obviously, it worked out well for them, which was interesting. Where they start to hit some major roadblocks, definitely was my experience with the Red Ring of Death. The entire chapter 5 we talked about the hardware failures. You started to see significant turnover at this point in the Xbox ecosystem. A lot of major developers who had been around for a very long time started leaving in droves. There's a lot of people who their careers at Microsoft stopped in between 2006 and 2007. And that was really because of the Red Ring of Death. I can't think of anybody who wasn't impacted by it. I was playing some games with the boys last night, and I was talking with one of my friends who is not a console gamer, and he said, "Yeah, I remember that very well." He even remembered the nickname, the cardboard coffin, that we would give to consoles. That was the box that they sent for repair. My personal story is a brief aside. My original Xbox died. As many of you know, I lost my original screen name and handle to that Xbox. I was Viper Magic. I mean, that's the name of the channel. That's my preferred gamer handle name. However, my original Xbox died. I got a replacement Xbox that also died. I called the support. They gave me, instead of 15% off, they charged me 15% on the cost of a repair. Then there was this huge lawsuit. Microsoft ended up refunding everybody the full amount. So I made, I think, like $60 on the repair of my second Xbox 360. It eventually died as well. And I swore off Xbox altogether, and I said, I'm done playing it. Years went by when Xbox finally rebranded the 360 as the Elite. It was the black edition. It ran significantly better than the basic white edition. My wife bought it for me as an anniversary present. And I said, I can't remember how to log into my old account. The password was not working. I tried so many times to log in, it locked me out of my account. So there is a Viper Magic on the Xbox account. It's me. I just can't access my own account. I have said many times before, and then I'll get back to the documentary, I have an open bounty to anyone. If you can clear the original Viper Magic Xbox name so that I can get it back, I will pay you $100. Open bounty. It will never happen. I wish it would. That's when I became Jassafat. Life goes on. But we all have our nuances and our experiences with the Red Ring of Death. And Microsoft, again, if there's any theme from this, it's money. Spent a ton of money to make it right, which they didn't make it right. They just finally got a little smarter with their hardware. The documentary ends on an uplifting note, although it starts off a little rough. Chapter 6, TV or not TV, talks about the fail of Don Matrick and a lot of the really stupid anti-consumer ideas that Microsoft had. Their focus had shifted away from gaming, and they had this Xbox Game Studio and some of these other things. And then the last 20 minutes of the documentary is the feel-good part of the documentary. That's when Daddy Phil comes in. He announces the Series S, the Series X, the Xbox One S, the Xbox One S, shuts down the game studio, builds Game Pass, re-emphasizes a focus and a foundation on gaming, and it's a bright new future for Xbox. What does the future hold? Well, that will remain to be seen. Very interesting that you look over the last 20 years with this really fine-tuned scope, though, because you see a lot of patterns appear. They get ahead, they do something stupid, they spend a couple of years fixing it. They get ahead, they do something stupid, they fix a couple of years getting back. Now, they're in a good place now, definitely with Game Pass, definitely with some of the major acquisitions they have and some of the major games on the horizon. It will remain to see, obviously, if they can keep the momentum going, or when are they going to make another mistake. I will say that I give major credit to them to, one, acknowledge and celebrate 20 years of history. That's awesome. And number two, to actually kind of put their money where their mouth is, in a sense, and release some really cool events. As I said, we had the Fan Fest event. We had the Microsoft Virtual Museum event. And now this. It's just to name a few things, on top of all the merchandise and other cool celebrations and stuff like that. It's a cool time to be a gamer for sure. And I'm glad that Microsoft has kind of looked into their history and has realized that, there's a lot to talk about and a lot of cool ways to express it. And this documentary, I think, is a great primer for people who want to just kind of understand it. But it's a good nostalgic look, both good and bad, depending on what part of history you're looking at. But hey, congratulations to Xbox. I proudly wear my Bethesda hat, which is now Team Xbox. You see I have the FanFest pillow behind me. I am still a big Sony guy, and that will never change, but I can absolutely acknowledge that Halo has changed my life for the better, and that I am very proud to be an Xbox owner. So I'm very curious to see what happens next for the company. Here's to 20 more years, and do yourself a favor and check out that documentary, because I think you'll leave it with a smile on your face. That's it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Merry Christmas, ho ho Halo, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.